He said, yeah, but see, it's easy to draw a shoulder with 40 lines, but try to draw a shoulder with one line. Try to get the right line. That's difficult to do.
Hello, and welcome to Alex Toth in Depth. This is Paul Fricke, cartoonist, comics professor, and Tothaholic. This is the show where we discuss Toth's influence on comics, character design, and visual storytelling. In this episode, we have a guest joining us for a discussion of Toth's work and influence. He's a top-notch illustrator and artist. He's done a slew of covers as well as interiors on projects like Batman and Houdini and Hellraiser, and a DC Comics art director and editor, overseeing such projects as Batman Black and White, Hush, Darwyn Cooke's New Frontier, Solo, Wednesday Comics, and many more. He worked with and was a friend of Alex's. Thanks for joining us, Mark Chiarello.
Oh, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
I assume you saw Toth's work early as a kid on TV and in comics?
No, not not
Really?
really. Yeah, I grew up. I was the Marvel nut. Back in the
Gotcha.
late '60s, early '70s, all through the '70s. The Marvel thing. Stan just, it was such a great club mentality that you just wanted to be part of that. And he made the artists and everybody really personalities. Jazzy Johnny Ramita and Jack King Kirby and all that stuff. That when I did see Toth stuff, because it wasn't so branded and trumpeted, that it didn't connect in my head that, I'd see some of his stuff in Creepy and Eerie, the black and white magazines, and I'd see the little name Alex Toth or Alexander Toth, and it wouldn't register as much as the Marvel hype.
Yeah, I was certainly a Marvel kid as well and bought into the Stan Lee stuff. And I think it was a big part of the appeal and charm of that stuff. But what you're describing does sound like the Toth being an artist, and maybe isn't, uh, especially for kids and many grown-ups, the first choice or something that can kind of slip by them.
Yeah, yeah. I think, certainly when you're a kid, you have a certain kind of taste, and as you get older, it hopefully advances, and you like stuff that's a little more sophisticated. And I think that's for a lot of Toth fans, that was the case.
Is there anything in particular of his work when you saw it that where it started to filter in and you started to take notice and study and follow it more?
Um, Boy, that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. I think his work was so subtle. He and I he's talked with so many people about simplicity and making it, making the drawing and the storytelling just almost invisible, and really, everything subservient to the story. I just think I really enjoyed the stories more than anything. And years later, there's a difference between looking at artwork as a fan and then looking at artwork as the same artwork as a pro. As a fan, you like it, you don't like it, you hate it, whatever. But as a pro, you realize, wow, I see what he's doing here. He's, the time shift from one panel to another. It's a different experience when you actually pick apart what he did.
Right.
Um, I've said this before, but I remember him saying to me, we were looking at when Image was all the rave. I was at his house and I brought over a bunch of comics and we were looking through them, and a couple of them were Image comics. And he kind of, I won't say he was nonplussed by it, because he he could enjoy anything really. He could get something out of everything. He was a really incredibly smart guy.
Yeah.
But he said, yeah, but see, it's easy to draw a shoulder with 40 lines, but try to draw a shoulder with one line. Try to get the right line. That's difficult to do. And man, being a professional artist myself, he was so right with that.
It's true, and I convey that to my students at MCAT all the time as well, and, uh, it's a great thing to keep in mind, and it's tough to get people to simplify, and to simplify your own work, but he's the standard in my book.
Yeah.
Where does he stack up for you then, as this has developed, as you've gotten older? Do you rate artists? Do you have a favorite?
Oh, sure, sure. I'm really, my friends kind of goof on me because I'm really prone to absolutes, like who's the greatest baseball player of all time? Who's the four greatest whatever on Mount Rushmore, and a good pal of mine, Steve Mitchell, and I always have that conversation, and he's a Kubert nut, and I'm a Toth nut, so we always have
Mhm.
that fight about who's that fourth head on Mount Rushmore, and I always say it's Toth. Um, but no, somebody asked me not too long ago who are your three favorite comic book artists of all time, and I said Alex Toth, Alex Toth, and Alex Toth.
Well, given how much, I bring up Toth, in classes the last 9 years, given that I'm doing the show, I'm sure people get tired of it for me too, but, I also, repeat myself.
And that's okay.
As much as I like, Kubert and many others, Toth always comes. I just can't get enough. So about your work then, and how you started. When did you first, become serious about art and comics?
Well, I always drew as a kid. You and I were talking about baseball earlier, and I always drew, Hank Aaron, pictures of Hank Aaron and Tom Seaver and all these Willie Mays, all these baseball players. And I eventually went to art college. I went to Pratt Institute in the '80s,
Oh,
and which was a great school. And I was oddly fortunate that my roommates were um, John Van Fleet, George Pratt, and Kent Williams, three
whoa,
brilliant, crazy, phenomenal artists.
yeah.
And we all loved comics, and I never realized that. Well, okay, I know somebody draws comics, but I never realized that. Well, you could do that. You could actually pursue that. And Kent Williams, who was my roommate, he was drawing for Heavy Metal and Epic Illustrated at the
Oh yeah, I
time.
recall his work then. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I was like, "Holy cow, you can actually do this? This is so cool." And I was looking. I had just gotten out of college. I was looking for a job, and Kent said to me, "Hey, I'm pals with Archie Goodwin over at Marvel. He's looking for an assistant. Why don't you go? Maybe you can get your foot in the door that way." And I did. I got the job with Archie, which was the greatest experience. And
Yeah,
you
I don't
know,
know if there are nicer guys in comics.
oh my God, the greatest, absolutely the greatest, and really funny. What the funniest guy you'll ever meet. It's sad that he passed. So he was so young when he passed, but
Too true.
man, and he would tell me stories. He kind of got me. We had a lot of similar interests, and he was friends with all these guys. And he would tell
Mhm.
me stories about Al Williamson and Toth and Kubert and all those guys.
I was gonna ask how like, why did you end up doing, um, going into the editor end of things rather than doing more art and interiors? And it sounds like it's how you broke in that kind of dictated that, or were there other reasons?
Well, yeah, I mean, the main reason was I was a chicken. I never thought my stuff was very good, and all my friends would always tell me to get over it, and I kind of never did until just recently. So I figured, well, I had a wife and kids, and I better make a living and pay the rent, and
Mhm.
so I segued the job into, I started doing some coloring because that was, I won't say it was easy, but it was, you don't put yourself on the line as much as if you're penciling a comic.
Right.
Um, and I worked with Mike Mignola quite a bit. We did Hellboy together, and
Yep.
that was really fun. But the money was okay; it wasn't great, and uh, and an opening at DC came up, and I became the art director there, and I was there for 26, 27 years, and it was a great job. But because I was a chicken, because I didn't want to, I feel that. whether it's true or not, I feel that as an artist, people sort of judge you as a person based on your art. If they don't like my art, they're not going to like me.
Yeah, is that more in the mind of the artist? We kind it's all jumbled up, so we take it personally?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. Uh, so it was easy for me to go to a job and get paid really well from Warner Brothers, who owned DC Comics at the time, and
Mhm.
and 26 years goes by, and and then just recently, having left DC, AT&T came in and bought DC and fired just about everybody, or
Yep,
laid off everybody, unfortunately. Uh,
yep, sorry.
oh, that's okay. Actually, it is okay because I'm happier now sitting in my studio drawing. I finally got over that fear, which is
Yeah, well, it's surprising it could take that long because to me, you're so good, but I also empathize with it, and I think a lot of artists would. You had a good run there, and I'm glad you're enjoying drawing now.
yeah. Thanks, me too. I just finished my first children's book, something I've always wanted to do.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it'll be out for Halloween, which is really fun. And it was just, man, it was so much fun.
Can you name the title or
Yeah, it's called Alien to Zombie. It's an ABC book for little kids. Flesk Publications is going to publish it. It'll be out. Hopefully, it'll be out for this Halloween.
did you write that as well, or someone else?
A friend of mine, Kevin Summers, wrote it. Did a
Okay.
really great job. He did a wonderful job on it. But man, it was fun. And I wish there was more money to be made in children's books because
Yeah.
I'm talking with Marvel right now about doing a Spider-Man project, writing and drawing a Spider-Man project. But man, until you sit down and draw comics, you have no idea how much work it is.
It's a lot of work, and there you wear many hats.
Yeah, yeah, and you have to chain yourself to the drawing table every day.
You do, yeah, that's a whole discussion. The I would recommend to everybody to go to Mark's website. Is that just markchiarello.com?
Yeah, yes, it is.
And there you can just get a quick taste of Mark's work in interiors, illustrations, covers. There's just a lot of great work. But then also, as your in your capacity as editor and art director, you you have quite a resume, and I appreciate your curating that and spearheading a lot of projects because without you, we wouldn't have a lot of some of my favorite comics and covers. What was your chief aim then as an art director and editor? I mean, other than just doing good work or doing good comics, was there something in particular that you would strive to do?
Um, I there's a saying I really subscribe to. I really believe in. It's I don't know who originally said it or coined it, but it's create the things that you wish existed.
Right.
I wish there was a cool Batman series of short stories that was all black and white by great artists. So we did Batman Black and White, and I collect old newspaper strips, the big Sunday strips, and I had wished somebody would have done a big newspaper, oversized newspaper with all of DC's cool characters. So we did Wednesday Comics.
So you had a vision for something you'd like to see, and then would go about making it, and had the opportunity and the platform to pull it off.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I had the opportunity. I had a love-hate relationship with Paul Levitz, who ran DC at the time, and I'd come up with kind of a neat idea, maybe a little kooky, but neat idea, and he would always say no, and it was just a battle. And eventually, over a course of years, he'd say yes for whatever reason. But
You had to just keep being persistent,
oh my God,
and sometimes would win out.
yeah, sometimes,
I get it. So,
yeah.
back. I'm just going to do a quick switch here. Back to influences. Other than Toth, do you have influences beyond that?
Yeah, I think maybe not I don't draw this way, and maybe not artistically, but just the vibe from those
Hmm.
Marvel artists, Gene Colan, and I love Jim Steranko and John Romita, and John Buscema, all those great artists. it gets you jazz. You look at the stuff and you get jazzed to draw stuff. I'm like I said, I'm probably going to be drawing this Spider-Man project, and I'm just on one hand, I'm really nervous because I don't know how it's going to come out. I don't know, what style do I do it in? What direction do you go in? But on the other hand, it's cool because it's a bucket list. I'm finally going to do. I was a Spider-Man nut when I was a kid. I'm finally going to
Same.
do Spider-Man. Yeah,
Yeah.
But do you draw it like Ditko or Ross Andrew or Gil Kane or Ramita? I guess maybe the answer is at the end of the day, you just draw it like yourself. But
Well, that's the thing about influences, right? I mean, uh, it's I think it's a great way to learn. Even now, I would copy Toth and Sickles just to actually get into the mindset and see how they did certain things. So it's never a bad idea, but obviously more slavishly do that when we're younger.
yeah,
And there have been projects that I've bailed on because I would have Toth sitting on my shoulder over me. I was trying to reach such a standard and draw a certain way instead of just kind of letting it be me. And I'm having more success uh, just getting out of my own way in that regard. Um, but it's tough to do sometimes, especially for younger artists when they're trying to figure things out.
yeah, and especially trying to be Toth.
Right.
Gee,
I
yeah.
know.
He told me we were talking about Wally Wood one time, and he told me that he said, "Yeah, Woody paid me the best compliment." He said, "Alex, you're the only guy whose stuff I can't steal. I can't trace it. I can't copy it because it's so. I guess because it was so purely him and idiosyncratic."
Well, and stripped down, there's no place to hide.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you'll figure out how to handle Spider-Man. It's kind of nice to, I think you're versatile enough then to be able to choose a direction that you want to go. Not everybody can do that, and some people lean into a certain style and then stick with that because that's what editors or fans want, or that's what gets comfy. So, I think
Yeah,
it keeps it interesting to be able to move things around a little bit.
I hope so. I sort of envy those artists who draw one way and they become famous and popular and successful for their style. But I think it's because I have such a bad memory. Every time I sit down, I have no clue what I'm doing, so I just sort of do it. Um, but you talk about influences. I'm also very influenced by the great American illustrators from the
Right.
50s and 60s and
Yeah,
70s.
you can see it in your work.
Well, I love that stuff. When you're a kid and you go to the grocery store with your mom, there was always the TV guide for sale right up by the cash register. And I'd always look at it and go, man, look at that Bob Peak drawing. And those were probably the first artists whose names I made note of in my head because, like, wow, who drew that cool, I don't know, Magnum PI cover?
Right. Well, and some of my favorite artists, because a lot of comics weren't signed, I didn't find out until maybe 10 years ago who they were. Like Harry Lucy, the Archie artist. I knew I had a favorite Archie artist, but I didn't know who he was until Kevin Nolan tracked it down and pointed out, or Jaime Hernandez. So um, it's nice when you can kind of put a name to it and then follow the work.
Hmm.
And uh,
Other,
and it's
other,
also nice that with Toth, a lot of the stuff that was unavailable to me for such a long time, and I've seen most of it as far as I know that he's done, unless there's more locked in a vault.
yeah, there's not much. There's not much that hasn't been put out there. A friend of mine, Ruben Procopio, who was very close with Alex,
Yep.
lives down the street. Wonderful guy, great guy. He's got a stack of unpublished Toth drawings that were like stories that Alex had started and not finished for whatever reason. And he and I always say, man, we should get together and publish these things, and maybe someday we will.
Well, I hope so. I'd like to see that, and or I'll contact Ruben myself.
Yeah.
I'd just like to see that stuff. Every time I see something new, I'm always excited. Sometimes his stuff is cast in a certain way or not next to other drawings, and then I think I'm seeing it for the first time, and I'm like, "Oh, I've had this book for 3 decades," but his work always looks new to me, uh, and still makes a big impression.
Yeah, yeah. I just You go through phases. You get obsessed with somebody and you fade from them, and then you always come back to it. And with Toth, I was just as an aside, I live in California. I was just visiting my mom in New Jersey last week, and I have a lot of my art collection uh, is being stored there, and I have this. Alex and I corresponded for like 15, 16 years, and Alex
Hmm.
would always, whenever he sent a letter back, he loved writing letters, as you know, and whenever he sent a
Yep.
letter back, he would put in a couple sketches. You know, um,
So you got a
he
big old pile.
Man, I put him in a portfolio. I have like 300 drawings by this guy.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God. I certainly didn't forget that I had it, but I sat on my bed looking at this portfolio and oh my God, it's astounding, some of these drawings.
You're making me jealous. I never had the guts to write him because I always thought if I did, given his reputation, he would tear me a new one if I sent him
No,
my stuff. And
absolutely not. Absolutely not. He would have loved you. He loved talking to intelligent people. He loved corresponding. Um,
well,
and
that's how I was a chicken.
uh-huh. Do you own any originals? Any Toth originals?
Well, the only one I own or have in my possession is when my buddy and I did we self-published a book called Troll Lords in the late '80s, and then a few years later we did a collection, like a trade with a new story in the back about our death character, and for it there's a two-page spread in the middle of the story
Hmm.
where we invited artists to do a 2 by 2 square, their interpretation of death. And I sent one to a whole bunch of artists and got a whole bunch back. And the ones that excited me were like Eisner and Terry Gilliam uh, and others. But when I got the Toth one, I went crazy. I
Wow.
was I stood at the mailbox and was kind of almost shaking. I couldn't believe it. And what
Wow.
he sent back was again his interpretation of death
Hmm.
was a black square with AT in the bottom right corner. That's all.
Yeah, that's Alex.
It's perfect. It's almost like the quintessential Toth piece,
It really is. It's really, high concept. Wow.
right?
Wow. That's cool that you got all those artists to do pieces.
It was fun. It was nice to connect with everybody and some people I grew up enjoying. Burt Breathitt did Opus with his head cut off, and yeah, I got to make that print available again. So, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so in another interview, or maybe it was in the Toth documentary, you mentioned I think that Toth drew unlike anyone else, and if you put him on a desert island with the same tools, he'd be the same guy and the same artist. Could you expound on that?
Um, I hope I can. You know, everybody's got a computer and Photoshop, and you can use millions of colors. And I love going to the art store, the art supply store, and buying a new pen. And it kind of because I do equate everything to baseball. There was a saying by the great Honus Wagner, the great shortstop. He said, "There's nothing to be in a ball player if you're a ball player,"
Hmm.
and there's nothing to be in a genius artist if you are Toth or you are Mobius. They just there was no bullshit. There was no subterfuge. It was all about the line on the paper, and you know. You look at some of the modern masters, Adam Hughes, Bill Sienkiewicz. These guys, they don't need to bullshit around. They could just do it. They could just sit down and do it.
Do you think then, and I agree with that, is that something that someone is born with or inherent, or is a lot of talent developing it, or a combination of both in your view?
Um,
Or
Again,
are there some people who just are a step above?
there's definitely people who are a step above. Back to baseball for a split second. There's three kinds of baseball players. There's the naturally talented one. There's the one who maybe is not so talented, but tries really hard, like Pete Rose, and gets talented
Right.
from sheer work. And
Hmm.
then there's the third one, and those are the ones you have to watch out for. The guys and gals that are incredibly talented, born talents, but who also work hard at it.
Right.
And the same is true for art. Bill Sienkiewicz certainly was born with a spark. He was born with God touched his right hand and said, "You can draw as better than anybody." But Bill draws all day long, every single day.
Right.
And if, I remember years ago I was over at Walt Noisey's house, and Walt and I were talking about. I think I was there with Kent Williams and Jay Muth at the time, and we were talking about Sienkiewicz, and Walt said something that's always stuck in my head. He said, "Bill has the best pair of hands ever in the industry." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "He can draw anything he wants, however he wants to. He's so talented." And I guess that's true. You look at the great draftsmen, Frank Frazetta, Mac Rayboy, Adam Hughes. Man, Sienkiewicz is certainly as good, if not a little better than everybody.
Yeah, he's amazing, and he explores, and it's grounded. And I've seen him do drawings at cons, like straight with a pen off the top of his head, and just creates it. And Toth had that ability too. We see it in what he called his alla prima drawings.
Mm-hmm.
He just jumps in without a net. I don't know if you described it this way, but uh, did anyone else draw like him? You've mentioned some other people, but most people, and certainly it's a natural thing, right? If you look at how to draw comics the Marvel way, what I see my students doing, everybody's learning structure and doing the underdrawing and everything like that, which is essential. But there's also a value in how Toth tackled his alla prima drawings, uh, just jumping in without a net and kind of trying to edit as you go. Do you see a value in that? And is that what he was after when he did drawings like that?
Well, I think people do that. Like if I go to a convention and I am drawing for somebody, I
Yep.
like to not pencil it out because then they look at you like you're doing a magic trick. Like, how's he drawing that? You know, if you're just drawing with a Sharpie or whatever, and there's a bunch of people out, artists now, who do the same thing. They just sit down and don't pencil and they draw, and it's astounding. It's like a magic trick. But with Toth, it wasn't. It was not at all for show. It was not a trick. It was in his head. It was like there was an opaque projector in his head, and he would just look at the paper and trace through his eyeballs. It would just appear on the page, and man, you can't do that. It's impossible.
Most can't, and I've tried to train myself, but it's just very difficult. And if you look at those alla prima 6x9
Yeah,
sheets that he did,
yeah.
he's not repeating himself most of the time.
Well, that's the key, because look, if I do go to a convention and somebody says, "Hey, draw Batman," I can draw that head. I can draw
Right.
Spider-Man's head. That's a trick that I've taught myself. But Alex could draw anything, anytime. Um, and we can talk about the great draftspeople in comics history. Um, but Toth was one of the great, great draftsmen, but he was also the very greatest storyteller. And man, that combination, everything about comics needs to be about storytelling. Um,
Okay, I'm gonna go here. So there are times in his work where I think the design takes over and the storytelling isn't as paramount. In general, I think you're right that the storytelling is the first thing, and that's what he would say too, especially in his early development in the early 50s. You could see him where the design uh, element took over, and the storytelling would be a little obfuscated. Um, do you find that in some of his work, or do you think that storytelling was always paramount?
no, I don't find that. And if you say it again, I'm going to punch you in the eye. Uh, he
Heretic.
he was the brilliant, brilliant storyteller. I mean, you look at through his entire career. I mean, what's an example? Like he did that Dell comic, The Land Unknown,
Yep.
which is real designy, but it's pure storytelling. it was never gimmicky. His design sense was just built into him. It was for me anyway. It was never gimmicky. It was all about the story.
Yeah, we'll just when we meet in person, we'll just fight it out a little bit. And I do
Okay.
not want to be on that end. I
Okay.
want you to win that fight.
Fair enough.
um, that can lead us then to reference. Then most of us use some kind of reference. I don't think it's a dirty word or a bad thing. And what he would counsel is to build up that visual library and remember stuff and know how things are structured and constructed so you can draw it straight through yourself. I don't know if everybody does that. When I'm working on current projects, I keep the reference there. I try to do what he said and keep it, take it in and then put it aside and just do it. But how much do you use reference in your work, and how do you feel about it in general?
Unfortunately, I use it too much. I'm a slave to it.
J.P. Leone said the same thing.
Really?
Yeah, he said that, and I was surprised
Well,
because he could. I think maybe he was a chicken sometimes too, because I think he could do it. And if you look at some of his initial sketches and thumbnails, it's all there.
Yeah.
But even he, toward the end of the career in life, was he felt relying on it too much. You feel the same way then, huh?
I do. I really do. And I think that's why that children's book was so much fun to draw, because I didn't use any reference at all. Like you sit down and draw a vampire, and it was fun and had a great time. I did ask Alex that specific question. I said, how do you use reference? Do you, because he had books all over his house,
right?
Zillions of books. I said, how do you use reference? How do you, and he said, well, what I do is I look at a picture of a car or whatever, and I close the book and I put it back on the shelf, and then I go down and sit down and I draw the car. Man, try to do that. That's impossible. I was told, and I don't know if it's true. I've heard it's true, but the great artist Michael Golden, he had the ability to. He used to draw the Nam, the Vietnam comic, the Nam,
Mm-hmm.
and if he had to draw a helicopter or a certain gun, there was a military bookstore a couple blocks up the street, and he would go there, find the reference, open the book, look at it, close the book, not buy it, walk out of the store, go home and draw it. He'd be able to remember it from all different angles.
Oh my gosh.
That's impossible, but it's, Toth had the same thing. We were talking about Alex and I were talking about Gil Kane, and, Alex mentioned, well, yeah, you're going to draw an alleyway with a garbage can and a crate of oranges in the alleyway. You're going to draw the same stuff over and over again. You should know how to draw it by now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's Alex is the yardstick that, man, we don't want to measure ourselves up to.
No, I've learned that the hard way, and it's a fool's errand.
It really is. It really is. Hey, I never ever showed my artwork to Alex.
Yeah.
Because our friendship was more important to me. And as you said, he could be critical of artists for sure. He saw all the shortcuts. He saw all the tricks. Oh shit, I'm not very good at drawing feet, so I'm not going to, I'll have everybody standing around in fog. And he'd call you on all that stuff, but.
Yeah, a friend of mine pointed out, I have a bunch of Frazetta books on my shelf, and he was like, Frazetta doesn't draw or paint feet very often. We looked at one painting after another, and there's almost no feet.
It's true. And
obviously he can draw them.
Oh, he could draw them. Well, it's like Mignola. When Mike started, one of the great artists in the history of comics. Mike was, I don't know if he felt he couldn't draw feet, but Mike's a brilliant draftsman. Mike could draw feet all day long, but early on in his career, he kind of shied away from it, I think.
You sought Toth out then? You made the pilgrimage to his house? Is that how the friendship kicked off?
Yeah, when I was in college, one of my roommates, as I mentioned, was George Pratt, and George said, "Man, Mark, you're such a Toth nut. I hear that if you write a letter to him, he really likes to correspond. He'll write you back. So George had gotten his address from a mutual friend, John Hitchcock,
Mm-hmm.
uh, another great fella. And George gave me Alex's address, and I wrote him a fan letter, and we started a nice correspondence. And after a year of a lot of back and forth, I said, "Hey, I'm coming out for San Diego Con. Uh, can I take you out to lunch?" And that was at the tail. For the last 20 or so years of his life, he never left his house. Never, ever, ever.
Right.
Very, maybe to get his mail. That was about it. But early on, I did pick him up, and we went to a Mexican restaurant here in Hollywood, and uh, I it was it was one of those things where it was so cool to meet your hero, but it was also very daunting. Like, what am I going to say to this guy? He's a genius. But I've said it before. The great thing about Alex was he could talk about any subject. He didn't really want to talk about comics that often. So you talk a lot about TV and movies and publishing, what's going on. So yeah, we it was. And then I went to see him every single year right after San Diego Con. I would drive from San Diego up to Los Angeles, and I'd sit in his living room for literally 9 hours, 10 hours, just sitting there talking.
Jeez.
I know you'd be exhausted at the end of the day, but it was so cool. It was so much fun.
I think again, he's known for being difficult, and some people bring it up all the time, and that's not what this show is about. But I think you've recently said that he was kind of a sweet guy. I don't see how you can spend 9 or 10 hours with somebody if you didn't hit it off, or if he wasn't kind in some fashion.
He was a really sweet guy, and unfortunately, maybe he was a little bipolar. Maybe
Right.
not extremely so, but um, he would if he felt you were treating him with respect and as a friend, he was lovely. But if for a second he thought you weren't, man, he was a real rough guy. He was not fun to be around, and that inevitably happened to anybody who he was friends with, except for Ruben. Ruben was the one guy who stayed friends with him forever.
And
Um,
Hitchcock too, I think.
yeah, I know he and Hitchcock had words once or twice, but
From
you
what I
know,
know, John wouldn't let it end things.
yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I'm Italian, and I take everything personally, and I was hurt by it, and um, you know, I long story short, I had pitched to DC to Paul Levitz that we do a best of Alex Toth book. And everybody asks me about this. How come you guys never did a book? Well, I pitched it year after year after year. And Paul always said no. Paul didn't think it would sell. Um, I mean, personally, I think maybe Toth was rude to Paul once, and Paul never forgot it. But
Yeah, it could be a personal thing, right?
maybe not. But Paul always said no, and I never got it done. And I was at Alex's house, and he got really kind of nasty to me. He said, "You're such a big shot at DC Comics. How come you can't get that book made?" And I was like, "Alex, what do you want me to do? I tried. I'm not the boss." And and then we didn't talk for like a year, I guess a year and a half. And Ruben called me. Ruben and I were talking. He said, "Hey, Alex really regrets being a jerk to you. But Alex, he's never going to admit that. Um, would you write him a letter?" And I said, "Yeah, let me think about it." And I wrote him a letter. And, asked him, just a nice, friendly letter. "How you doing? How's things? Blah, blah, blah. Here's what's going on with my life." And I didn't hear back from him. And like 2, 3, 4 weeks go by, and I hear that Alex Toth died.
Oh,
Yeah. And I was, obviously shaken up by that. And then another 2 weeks go by, another 3 weeks go by. And I'm at the office at DC, and the mailman comes in, and well, he slid my mail under my door because my door was closed, and I went over and picked him, and there was a letter from Alex Toth. And
yeah.
man, it's weird getting a letter from someone who's been dead for weeks.
Right.
And it was actually a sweet letter. He it was very warm, and he didn't really apologize for being a jerk. But
Right.
as I've said before, for Alex Toth, it was really a nice letter. It was an apology. And I think toward the end of his life, he realized through Ruben and through his four kids who he got back together with.
Hmm.
Uh, I think he realized the value of friendship and family, and something he knew all along, but it kind of he lost track of it over the years.
Well, like you said, during that 20-year period, the hermit years, and after the death of his wife and mom, it took a toll on him. He was still active and engaged in corresponding with people, and people like you would visit, but um, he holed up.
He really did, and man, trying to get him for a guy who drew every day,
Hmm.
trying to get him to do a job, a story, a cover was so difficult. I got him to do just a few things over the years. He was when I did Batman Black and White. I wanted him to do a story. He ended up doing a cover.
Right.
Um,
You've said he had a pretty good story. You thought.
he had a great story. Yeah, he had a
You're
he, and I was at his house, and he told me the story. He said, "Here's what I'm thinking." It was a great story. I said, "Alex, just draw that. It's great." But
right.
he just never did.
Well, he stopped himself in a variety of ways in that regard. Where do you think his writing stacks up when he's doing his own writing? Do you think it holds up well, or do you think he hitched up like he thought he did?
Uh, he gets criticized for his writing. People think it was very old Hollywood style, very simplistic. I like his writing. I don't think it was Alan Moore or Archie Goodwin or the great writers, but I think it was you know it's what he wanted to draw, and that's kind of cool. But
Right.
that story that he paraphrased was really actually pretty deep and pretty interesting. Batman falls off a building and gets really messed up, and some old woman in a tenement takes him in uh, and takes care of him. It was really a cool story.
Yeah, it's too bad that he couldn't follow through and get you that. I know you're frustrated that he didn't, and I've heard other stories too. A variety of people of jobs he passed on for a variety of reasons. Brian Augustine tried to get him to do a shadow story, um,
Mhm.
and almost had him on the hook, and he ranted and turned it down or whatever. So those kind of things, it's just lost gems for me, one after another. But I'm glad we've got what we've got, and even if he didn't do that Batman story, you got that cover, and I don't know, it's one of the greatest all time covers in my view.
Man, it's so cool. And he used to, he wasn't an egotist. You go to his house, he didn't have his artwork in frames all over the place. That was the one piece he did have. The original artwork was leaning against the couch. And I think he acknowledged that it was a pretty sharp piece.
So a lot of people are influenced by Toth, and we were talking about John Paul Leon earlier. You did work with him on a black and white Batman Black and White, the Riddler story that Simonson wrote. And
Yeah.
are there other things you worked with JP on, or
Just a few small things. I I'm still just brokenhearted by that.
yep,
You know, Man, what a sweet guy. And of course, when someone passes, you say, "Oh, he was the greatest guy." Um, he just, I remember I was at a comic convention. I think it was maybe New York Con a few years back, and he was sitting there with Tommy Lee Edwards, another great artist. And
yep,
I always love talking with those guys, and they're such different people. Tommy Lee's gregarious, outward. JP was such a quiet, self-effacing fella. And I was talking to JP, and I said, "Man, when he had a portfolio of his stuff, he was selling some of it." And I said, "Man, can I look through this?" He goes, "Yeah, of course you can." And he had a piece that was from what was the book? Challengers, I guess.
hmm
Really beautiful page, and it was very Toth influence. I said, "Man, I love this. I love this page. This is like the best thing you've ever drawn." I said, "Well, this and you did a page that was a splash page of the Vision jumping off a subway train." And he goes, "Oh yeah, I have that one too." And he took out both pieces, and he gave them to me. And he said, "Here, I want you to have these."
Oh my.
And I was like, "Dude, there's no way I'm taking these." And he said, "Mark, I'll be really hurt if you don't take these. I want you to have these."
What a
And
sweetie.
I do have those. But who's like, everybody's an egotistical jerk these days in sports, in comics, in entertainment. Man, JP was just what a sweetheart.
Yeah, nice guy, and then with the work and the talent to boot. I'm glad we were able to chat and have a discussion in episode 3. And sad I won't be able to talk to him again.
Yeah.
But his work, we got his work. We got Toth's work. We have his work.
Yeah, I'm glad you got that on tape because that's a really great episode. If,
Thanks.
if your listeners haven't heard that one, I love that. I listened to it twice. It was great.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun. And then you also work with Darwyn Cooke, and a lot of Toth disciples in the last few months have passed. JP and then Jesse Ham as well, who wrote really brilliantly on Toth, in my view, and then Darwyn a few years ago. How did you come to work with Darwyn, and did you guys talk Toth a lot?
We did, yeah. We talked. Darwyn was another tricky personality.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
He could be the greatest guy, the most generous guy. He also could be whatever.
I
But
get you.
yeah, I think I was on a podcast about 6 months ago, and I said something that I sort of wish I hadn't said, but I'll say it again since I already said it. I was very close working with Archie Goodwin. I was very close with Archie. He was like my second dad. He was lovely, lovely guy. And we used to talk about, he was friends with Frazetta and everybody. And he worked with everybody, Ditko, Gene Colan, everybody. And I said, Archie, stop dicking around. Tell me who is the best artist. Who is the best? I didn't say artist. I said, who is the best you ever worked with? And he kind of made a joke about like looking side to side so nobody else would hear what he was going to say. He was a very funny guy. And he said Toth absolutely was. And I was like, whoa, oh my God. Well, for me, and I was amazed that I wasn't amazed at the answer because of our worship for him, for Toth.
Right.
But I was surprised Archie let that out of the bag. And, for me, Darwyn was the most talented guy I ever worked with, person I ever worked with. I've worked with better draftsmen. I've worked with great storytellers, but Darwyn could write, could draw, could tell a story better than just about anybody. I mean, I can't name somebody who writes and draws their own stuff that, can do it that well.
Jaime, maybe.
Maybe, yeah, but there's not the body of work that you wish there was for Jaime.
Really? What, 30 plus years of 11 Rockets or Locos isn't enough?
Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I just sort of lost interest in it after a bunch of years. You're right. I shouldn't have said that he doesn't have the body of work because he does. Maybe it's not the variety that I mean, even Toth, Toth drew a certain way, but he had different periods of work. He experimented. Whereas I don't know that Jaime, as brilliant as the stuff is, he draws a certain way, and that's great. But Darwyn could draw different ways. I mean, you look at his Parker stuff. He's sort of like,
and he's influenced by those earlier mid-century illustrators like you are too.
Very much so. So
and he pulled that out for a certain spirit story or a certain New Frontier story or whatever else.
Yeah. And please make no mistake, I'm not at all slagging on Jaime. I love Jaime's stuff. I mean, I love the stuff. But when we're talking about the best of the best, for me, it was Darwyn.
New Frontier, is that something where he brings it to you and it's kind of fully realized? He knows how he wants it to be colored as well, or is that something that you have a hand in?
We would, one of the real fun things about being the art director at DC all those years was I loved talking to people I worked with. I became great friends with Tim Sale and Adam Hughes and Paul Pope, all these guys. Great to talk with Amanda Connor about storytelling. So Darwyn and I would talk all the time, every day, every other day, and he did Ego for me. I found his proposal for Ego, and we published it. Batman Ego.
Isn't that like the first thing he did there?
Yeah, he years earlier he did a small story, like a 3-page story, but I think he was a teenager or something at that point. And I apologize. I've told this story a million times, but I'm going to tell it one more time.
Yeah.
One morning I was at DC and I got a cup of coffee for myself, and I got a cup for really great editor, Scott Peterson, who used to be in the Batman office. And I brought him his coffee, and I sat and we were chatting. And he had a big stack of manila envelopes, mailings that he had gotten. And I said, "What's all this?" I mean, it was like 5 foot tall. It was just a stack of. I said, he said, "Oh, it's my turn this month to be submissions editor. I have to look through all this stuff and respond to all these people." And they were all manila envelopes, except for there was one toward the very bottom. It was a black envelope. And I said to Scott, "Hey, watch this." And I did the trick when the magician pulls the tablecloth off the table and all the silverware stays. Well, I pulled the black envelope and all the mailings went flying all over his office. I didn't quite do the trick. And I laughed and I ran out and I said, "You got to clean this up." And I ran out. I took my coffee and ran out. And I had this black mailer in my hands, and I went back to my office and I opened it, and it was from some guy named Darwyn Cooke from Canada. And it was a proposal with artwork about this story called Batman Ego. And I literally sat there and read the whole thing. There were about 20 illustrations, presentation illustrations. And it was incredible. It was so well done. It was so well thought out. And I picked up the phone and I dialed the number and I said, "Hey, can I speak to Darwyn Cooke?" And I got him on the phone. I said, "Hey, I have to run it through channels, but I'm really interested in publishing this. What do you think?" He goes, "Well, I would love it, but your timing's bad because I just took a job with Bruce Timm in California to work on Batman, one of the Batman TV cartoon shows. But he said, but man, it's only going to last about 6 months. I'd love to talk when I'm done." And sure enough, 6 months, 4 or 5, 6 months went by, and he called me back, and we published. He drew the whole thing, and we published it, and it was really well received. I mean, for somebody's first foray into the business, it was really well received. And I said, JLA is really hot right now. Grant Morrison was writing it, and Howard Porter was drawing it. It was a really good comic. "You got any JLA stories in your head?" And he goes, "Actually, I do." And he had written this thing in his head over the course of years and years and years, New Frontier. So it was pretty easy for him to sit down and flesh it out. And, honestly, to this day, I have to say that's the best comic book series I've ever worked on. I think it's the perfect comic.
I've reread it many times and sat down and studied it, and it not only holds up, it soars, and I show it and pages of it to students.
Yeah.
It's really special.
It really is. And, as a Marvel kid, as the Marvel fan, I didn't understand DC characters. I mean, the Flash, he runs fast, big deal. Green Lantern, why are people so upset? And working with Darwyn on that book, I got it. He made me see what these characters really are.
I saw Stan Lee on a panel at my very first convention, and he was doing the huckster routine, and somebody asked, like, why are Marvel comics good, or what's wrong with DC, and he was like, DC comics are bland. Like, Marvel comics are exciting, and I totally bought into it. It took me some time to get over that,
Yeah.
but I never worked for Marvel and worked for DC, so I could straddle.
Yeah. I years later I started buying old DC comics. I never saw Joe Kubert's War comics when I was a kid. It wasn't until I was roommates with George at George Pratt at Pratt Institute, no relation. He had his long boxes of of Kubert war stories. I was like, oh my God, I never realized this stuff was so good.
Yeah, it that stuff holds up very well. I still go back to Toth more than anyone else, but there's a whole bunch that I occasionally dip into. Finishing up on Darwin, obviously he was a Toth fan. He drew a story called The Alex that I would recommend people check out. But also, I mean, in an interview, he would recommend Toth for just about everything. But then I think he held up and said that not for superheroes necessarily. Do you have
Mhm.
any idea why he would say that, or what it was about it that you think that Darwin might have thought where Toth wasn't ideal for superhero stuff?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. I think that maybe because he didn't do that much superhero stuff. My answer is kind of a funny one. Toth could draw any genre, all the genres, better than everybody. I mean, yeah,
Right.
okay, Jack Kirby created romance comics, but Toth was the greatest romance
I
artist.
agree.
Period. Westerns. There are guys, John Severin. There are guys and gals who drew westerns, but nobody drew them like Toth. Film noir, mystery, supernatural shit. I think if you give Toth too much credit on superhero stuff, then he's everything, and I think
That explains the hedge.
yeah, I think so. And Darwin was a big Kubert fan, and um, I you know I never really cared for uh, Kubert's superhero stuff as much as Gene Colan and John Romita and John Buscema. Um,
Yeah, on Kubert, I'd prefer the war stories, Fire Hair, things
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Those
um,
things hold up very well.
yeah, yeah.
So on Toth, do you have a favorite period of Toth or favorite stories, or are you like me where you like all the periods?
I like all the periods. I really, really do. You go through different phases. Um, I find some of the real early stuff when he was like 16 years old a little clunky, but shit, that's understandable. But then he hit his stride so quickly um, that the creepy and eerie stuff and the four color comics for Disney for Dell. Um, Man, that stuff's so good.
It is, and sometimes he was doing, oh, let's say the mid '60s. He would do some kind of thing that was almost semi-realistic, as far as Toth goes, for like an airplane war story for Warren, like in Blazing Combat, right? And then like the next month, he would do another cartoons or surf story in a completely different style and not miss a beat. And most people just can't do that.
Yeah, nobody can
That
do that.
good.
Yeah, nobody can do that. Yeah.
It's amazing.
It,
It's
it's
amazing.
I mean, look, we're drooling fanboys when it comes to this guy.
I'm afraid so.
And that's the reason I really wanted to do that book, The Best of Toth at DC, was I wanted the stuff to be in print. I wanted people who had never seen have never young artists who have never seen his stuff. I wanted them to be able to look at it. When I looked at portfolios all those years at conventions, um, I'd always say, "Hey, you should look at Alex Toth. Do you know Alex Toth?" And most people said, a lot of people said, "No, I don't. I don't. I've heard the name. Where do I find it?" And it's hard to, you could track down a couple of comics, but it becomes a full time occupation to find all his stuff. Um,
Yeah, and you can find stuff online now, and
yeah,
but now even though the books have come out the last whatever 7-10 years, some of those are going out of print or are out of print now. So probably a DC collection, despite your great efforts, and thank you for that. Is that ship's probably sailed?
yeah. I mean, never say never. Maybe me and you'll be running DC Comics next month.
Sure, that'll be the day. My hope is to continue to proselytize for Toth with the show and expand things so there will be a demand, and someone like Levis will think they can make money off it.
Yeah, I think what you do is an incredible service, and it comes out of I know it comes out of your heart, and it comes out of your your love of art and storytelling. But man,
Absolutely.
it's invaluable, and
Thank
when
you.
when someone would come up, a young artist would come up, and I'd always say, "What artist do you like? Who do you follow?" And once in a while, somebody would say, "Oh man, Alex Toth," and I'd look at him like, "Dude, what did you just say?"
I'd run into them too. I was always shocked
Yeah,
and
yeah.
pleased. So what to you is, I mean, there's catch words that we could use and phrases for Toth about simplicity and so on and so forth. But what do you think then is his lasting legacy? Why do you think people should read and study and emulate his work, and how should they emulate his work and apply his artistic principles?
I'll tell you what. You answer that question. What do you think? No, so I'm not being jerky. What do you think? I'm not being flip. What do you think?
Well, I've heard Howard Chaykin say that if you try to copy Toth, then you're not really understanding him.
Hmm.
And I think it's more important then to understand how he thought about things. And even in some of his letters, he would say, in his notes to people, he would say, don't copy and follow every jot and tittle of whatever I put down.
Yeah,
Think it through for yourself and find your own way to explore and develop. And I just think you can learn so much from looking at his work and studying it, because to me, all that stuff that I've mentioned in other episodes in regards to draftsmanship and anatomy and design and cropping and composition, different character types, storytelling, page layout. He's doing all of it. Lettering, his lettering is incredible.
yeah,
It just is my favorite lettering too.
yeah,
Sorry, Darwyn. His superhero stuff is great too. So uh, there's just such a wealth there that I think anybody can learn from it, and that's why I bring it up in freaking every class I teach.
yeah,
They get tired of it, but it's like when I consider how to get the lesson across, how can I not show his stuff? Because I think he did it in such a way that you're missing something if you don't check it out.
yeah. That absolutely true. I think you hit it on the head. You have to draw the way you draw. Don't, everybody's got influences, certainly. Um, but I'm not Alex Toth. I can't draw like Alex Toth. I'm not even going to try to.
In your work, though, and I just wanted to cover this briefly, but there's something you do where it's bold and graphic and the design sense is just off the charts, but then you keep a rough line to it as well. I mean, JP had this a little bit too, where he really worked on making sure the line had a certain character to it. Why do you go about it that way? And what are you after and how do you achieve it?
Um, I know, and I'm not a teacher. I'm not very verbal. Um, I have taught and I've enjoyed it, but there are some people who are natural teachers. I know three absolute truisms of art, and one of them is I learned when you're a kid, when you're a young artist, you try to draw. How do I draw the straightest line? Can I draw a perfectly straight line? How do I draw a perfectly round circle? And you work at it. You try. Dude, that's the opposite of what you want to be doing. You want a you want a clunky, shitty circle. You want a line that's look. I draw with a Pentel. Dave Johnson gave me this Pentel brush pen years ago.
Hmm.
The great Dave Johnson, and I draw with that on watercolor paper. Now, watercolor paper is very bumpy,
Right.
and what you get is a line, but you get a line with real interest to it, real character to it. That's what you want. You want interest to your stuff. You want emotion to the line. You want calligraphy to the line. Um, and it takes years to realize that.
It does. It's what I'm after in my work. On my current project, I'm working on in a sketchbook. I do the pages two size in a moleskin sketchbook, and when I have students do exercises not only to draw their head and work without a net, but also to work on different surfaces and look for that character of line, because we all have a tendency to kind of try to make things as good as we can or perfect. We freeze up, and anything that can kind of remove that is
Hmm.
not only going to help you produce better work and faster. You're going to get out of your own way a little bit and just let the happy accidents happen.
And that's what it's all about. That's why I love to draw with a big Sharpie, a big fat Sharpie.
Yeah.
because you're getting lighting, you're getting emotion, you're getting so much to that stuff. It's not perfect. But perfect's boring.
Well,
You want some sort of, you want who you are as a person, as an artist, as a whatever. You want it to be on the page. I've said it a million times. In the old days, you had to draw a certain way. In the 40s, 50s, even 60s, you had to draw like Kurt Swan. You had to draw like John Buscema. A foot was so big and not bigger. But now you can draw like, God, there's so many good artists out there who draw the way they want to draw. Um, you have to practice, 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 but be yourself. Put your interests into your artwork.
yeah, in terms of art, concept, story, if there's anything that is the most attractive to me in reading someone else's work, even if it's not perfectly drawn or the draftsmanship is there, the unique quality of that person coming through in the work is what is most interesting to me. That's what I gravitate to.
Absolutely, absolutely. All the greats, Mobius, and God, you can name all of them. There's um, the real. You look at Mike Mignola's work. Back in the '60s, Mike would have never worked in the industry. It's so idiosyncratic. It's so unique. But Mike Mignola made history drawing the way he wanted to draw. That's cool. Tim Sale, look at Timmy's stuff. Great storyteller. Very, very. Tim and I talk about Toth once a month.
Mm-hmm.
Timmy loves Alex's work. We share
He's on my
that.
list. I'd like to
Yeah,
talk to him as well.
yeah, great guy. Really interesting guy. But Tim draws the way he wants to draw, and that's one of the great things about modern comics is, man, there's every flavor out there.
There is a whole bunch. In some ways, it's the best time.
Yeah, some ways it's the best time, some ways it's the worst time.
I hear you. I
Yeah.
hear you. Well, you had a good run, like I said, at DC, and thanks for the work you brought there. I'm glad that you're finding your more time to find your unique take on your artwork with upcoming projects. Where can people find your stuff, and how can they reach you, and how and what should they be looking for?
Yeah, I have an Instagram page, Mark Chi DC, and I have my website, markchiarello.com, which anybody can reach me through that. Um, I've got a bunch of really fun projects coming up. I'm really nervous but psyched about this possible Spider-Man thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did have, unfortunately, I had a project at IDW, a Star Trek project, where I was going to draw the old, Shatner and Leonard Nimoy and Kirk,
Yep.
Kirk and Spock. That fell apart, unfortunately. But I did a bunch of pages for that, and man, that was fun because I think it was the first time I was able to just draw exactly how I want to draw, and it's real colorful and 1960s ish. It's got
That's
that
great.
psychedelic look to it. Maybe that will work out eventually. But for now, I'm not going to be doing that.
Well, I hope it does.
Yeah, yeah. I'll send you the page. I'll send you the couple pages I did. I think you might like them.
I bet I would. I appreciate that. Thanks again for joining us today. It's been a blast talking comics and process and art and Toth. Really a pleasure.
Paul, thanks. I really had a good time, and please keep doing what you're doing. It's awesome.
Thanks much. I'm back on track, and I'll keep plugging away. Thanks.
Cool.
That's all the time we're giving to this episode. This again is Paul Fricke for the Alex Toth In Depth program. Comments, questions, or compliments, email paul@opalo.com. Look for links listed in show notes. Follow at Alex Toth In Depth on Instagram for daily Toth art. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on your preferred platform. Just type in Alex Toth In Depth, tell your friends, leave a 5-star review. There's also a visually augmented video version of this program on YouTube, so subscribe and spread the word. Until next time, go with Toth. And don't forget, the less you have of something, the greater its value and importance.